Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I will just wait for one more minute because people. All right. Okay. And let us begin. All right. Good morning and assalamu alaikum to everyone joining us today from the US, Pakistan, and around the globe. My name is Mehlaka Samdani, and I serve as the director of the Community Alliance for Peace and Justice, an advocacy organization that works to improve US foreign policy towards Pakistan and Palestine. I'd like to welcome you all to the second event of our Voices of the Diaspora series, highlighting leaders in the diaspora who are shaping democracy and human rights discourse in Pakistan. Today, we are delighted to be joined by two brilliant analysts, Dr. Muit Pirzada and Dr. Hussain Nadeem, who will analyze the institutional and societal factors behind Pakistan's democratic deficit and also explore strategies to address it. I should say here that even though our focus today is not Balochistan, but I did want to mention the horrific Jafar Express attack that took place just 4 days ago, which really underscores how military authoritarianism, institutional failures, and human rights abuses worsen security and governance challenges. This was not just an isolated attack, but really exposes the deep-rooted and systemic issues at play in Balochistan and indeed in all of Pakistan. So I'm going to introduce our speakers in just a little bit, but before I do that, I'll just quickly share the format of today's discussion. For the first 40 to 45 minutes, I'll ask them a series of questions, and then we'll open the conversation up to the audience. I would ask you all to please submit your questions in the Q&A function that you see on the screen below. So now I'm going to turn and introduce our speakers. First, we have Dr. Muit Pirzada. He is a British Pakistani geostrategic analyst, TV anchor, columnist, and blogger, currently based in Washington, D.C. He is the founding editor of Global Village Space, an online news publication with a print magazine. He also provides regular political analysis on his YouTube channel, which reaches millions of people globally. He has high degrees from Columbia University and the London School of Economics. Next, we have Dr. Hussain Nadeem. He works at the intersection of artificial intelligence, policy, and national security. He is a Maurice Greenberg World Fellow at Yale. He pioneered data analytics for evidence-based policy in Pakistan, earning Forbes 30 Under 30 recognition. Hussain holds a BA from George Washington University, an MPhil from Cambridge, and a PhD from the University of Sydney. Thank you both so much for joining us. So, gentlemen, I'd like to sort of begin with a very broad question to each of you, and we'll ask Dr. Pirzada to go first. How do each of you view the democratic deficit in Pakistan? What are the factors that contribute to it, and what are its most prominent manifestations?
Mehlka, thank you so much for your very kind introduction and for organizing this. And I'm very glad to be joining this space, not only with you, but also with Professor Hussain Nadeem, whom I consider one of the most intelligent of the Pakistani, academics. I'm really looking forward to listen to his analysis of the situation. Regarding the question of the democratic deficit in Pakistan, I think the reasons actually lie in both history, culture, in geography. It is not as simple as people sometimes think, especially in the last 3 years, that this regime change operation against Imran Khan, or maybe they go 5-10 years before, or they try to find the answers in the personality and characteristics of the one military chief, or in the characteristics of the GHQ itself, or that the army officers are very greedy and corrupt, and things like this, or the courts haven't really fought up. I think when you look at the first issue of the history, the Pakistan, and I'm in my subsequent answers, I'll restrict myself more, but give me a few more minutes to explain this. First of all, the Pakistan Muslim League, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's party, was very ill prepared politically for the kind of challenges that it found us on its way, because I suspect that they were looking for a negotiated constitutional arrangement out of the British Empire. They were not looking toward creating a watertight, totally separate state, which would be at loggerheads with the Indian Union. If you look at the fact that in 1946, they accepted the cabinet mission plan, so they were looking forward towards a different kind of arrangement. They were not looking forward to this kind of adversarial straight relationship. Point one. Point two is this, that they had no real political roots in the areas that constituted the West Pakistan. They had no roots in Punjab, in Sindh, in Balochistan, or in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The only political roots they had were in the former East Pakistan. And that is why the former East Pakistan politics very quickly came into loggerheads with the West Pakistan, where, because of the lack of the political roots, the civil military bureaucracies, right from the very first year, started dominating the process of decision making, including on Balochistan, which you refer in the very beginning. And from 1952 onwards, realizing this thing, the civil bureaucracy is calling the shots. The military bureaucracy became part of the decision making. And in early 1950s, another thing happened. There was John Foster Dulles was the Secretary of State, and Alan Dulles, his brother, was the director of the CIA. And this is the time of the McCarthyism and the fear of communism all over the world. And Pakistan, especially because of East Pakistan, where the leftist politics and communist politics and income inequality issues were more, the American establishment identified Pakistan as the risk area and decided to forge a relationship with Pakistan's military establishment. And then the rest of that is the history, that how the penetration of the military establishment went deeper and deeper and deeper into the administrative structure of Pakistan. So this is the one issue of the democratic deficit. The other is the religion confusion from the very beginning. And military very quickly found itself allying itself with the mullahs, thus the military mullah alliance, the term first used by Professor Hoodby. But even without the military mullah alliance, the confusion about the religion, because Muslim League in 1940s, when it was unable to curry any favor with the Muslim, they didn't get any votes from the Muslims in 1937 elections. So they harped upon the theme of that they need Pakistan for Islam. And this actually momentarily aligned the ultra-conservative and mullahs and whatever with them. But subsequently, the mullahs genuinely believed, or they were made to believe this thing, that this country was created in the name of Islam. And then they started asking for more and more laws, legislation, policy decision to favor their worldview. So the new state from the very beginning started developing a very morbid worldview. So Pakistan has never inherited a progressive liberal worldview. The third problem is the geography. If you look at the map, apart from India in the south and east of Pakistan, no country in Pakistan's west, in Pakistan's north and east is even slightly democratic. In the north and northwest of Pakistan, we have Afghanistan, and then we have Central Asia, and there are brute dictatorships and medieval societies. When you look at the east of Pakistan, you have authoritarian China. And then you have Burma and others. And when you look at Pakistan's west, you have an authoritarian Iran. So the only inspiration Pakistan can get is either from the west or from India. And with India, we have a conflict relationship. So these are the factors that can explain the democratic deficit. I have taken enough time. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Pirzad. I'm sure we'll have follow-up questions to that very broad and very interesting analysis. I'm going to now turn it over to you, Hussain, to answer the same question.
Thank you so much, Malika. Pleasure to share the platform with Dr. Mohit Pirzada. I'm still absorbing what Dr. Mohit has talked about, and I think it's going to take me a little bit of more time to fully absorb, because he has put down a very interesting framework on how the historical background has shaped the different interest groups that emerged out of it. And I want to pick up the needle from there and talk a little bit more on these issues and beyond as well. But the onset, when you talk about the democratic deficit in Pakistan, the underlying assumption over there is that there is a democracy in place. Mm-hmm. And I think this is very important for in the purpose of the discourse. We have to understand, is there a democratic deficit in Pakistan, or is there actually the authoritarianism that is at risk right now? Because unless and until we don't really anchor ourselves in what the existing configuration of Pakistan is, we will never be able to address it. So when we talk about the democratic deficit, the underlying assumption is that there is democracy. My response is that there isn't a democracy. There wasn't a democracy in the first place. There has been a lip service to democracy for the purpose of attracting geopolitical attention, etc. But in reality, Pakistan is, and a lot of times, the people say that, Pakistan is not what it is. Pakistan is not today what it is supposed to be, or Pakistan has not achieved its ultimate dream. I tend to differ on that, and I would pick up on Dr. Muhyiddin's assessment of that. Pakistan is exactly what it was supposed to be. This is exactly what we were supposed to be, because when the partition happened, and I'm going to talk a bit about history, the Praetorian oligarchy that emerged was essentially the civilian bureaucracy, the military establishment, and the feudal elite. These were the three remnants of the colonial empire. Now, for instance, in the case of the United States, that undertook a very, very heavy decolonization where they changed everything. I mean, if they use the words like this, the Americans started using the English in a different way. So they completely undertook a reformation of the language, the art, the culture, the ethics, the morals, every single thing. In Pakistan, never happened. Even the Indians tried under Nehru to, decolonize and develop their own organic language and organic art, culture, history, etc., on which the pillars of nationhood is built. Now, for 77 years, there has not been a structural reforms in the country. There has not been a decolonization project. In fact, there's anything, Pakistan's early leaders, and to this date, have been obsessed with the nod and with the validation of the Western political leaders, to a point where they have disconnected themselves from the local population and become more attuned with the problems of the Western societies. That is the upper intellectual elite that I'm talking about, the Western elite that I'm talking about. And when the second and third generation leaders now, who have been studied in the 2000s from good universities here in the US, when they go back, they're not just going back on their own. It's a recycle of another wave of colonization. So the early founding fathers of Pakistan, who were studied at Oxford and Cambridge, they were obsessed with a particular geopolitical context, and we're a very geopolitical heavy society. Now, the second wave of the individuals that ruled Pakistan were the military officials, again, very heavy on geopolitical. And now the third wave, their children and their children, again, people who feel more connected in New York's and Washington and London's than with their own people back home. Now, the reason I'm setting out this is because when we look at the power dynamics and power structure of Pakistan, you'll realize that democracy practically was a lip service, is a lip service. The permanent architecture of Pakistan is an authoritarianism where you have political dynasties, the military establishment, and the civil bureaucracy that is changing positions, changing faces, and that is essentially there. Now, democracy is something that we can hope for, that we can go forward for. So when we talk about these things, there is two specific things that I like to mention. One, naturally, there is an internal politics that we're talking about, where these different authoritarianist structures are fighting with each other. The military will sometimes take over, the civilian bureaucracy in the early days took over, and then the political dynasties fight back. So there is an internal element. Then there is an external element to it, which is where the geopolitics comes in, where Pakistan's political and ruling elite that doesn't want to really get involved in the local mess. Like, who wants to care about polio, who wants to care about the woman's maternal health, etc. Those are not the sexy subjects that you would like to talk about or work about unless they have a certain aid value. If they can generate some dollars in aid, great, let's talk about it. Even climate became more sexy when the People's Party government realized that there is like a billions of dollars of aid you can actually earn in through climate change. And all of a sudden, we have the climate ministry that is now talking about climate with no sense of what climate really is. It's an extractive political elite, which basically plays a con. There is a local face where they're extremist Islamists, the TLPs, and anti-Zionist and anti-blah, blah, blah. And then there is an external face where they're, the liberals of the most liberals, and Imran Khan is Taliban Khan. And, all these bearded guys, these are like crazy lunatics, and we are the wall between this mess and the West. So this is what they have. And then the third element is after the external. So the internal, the external, and the third is the technological element. Now, if you look at the technological part, and I'll end it over here, the change in the technology has been one of the biggest thing that has happened since the partition for this country. And I would put it down social media specifically, because the decentralization of information where, once there was only one state-run broadcaster, PTV, would put out a news transmission at 9 p.m. And if there was a military coup at night after that, you would not find out until the next day. So we moved from the PTV, one PTV, to 100 private broadcasters, which, through the establishment into this, panic. I know Mohit doesn't like the word establishment, but it's just in our dictionary now. So it threw like the military powers into this panic on how to control. But by the time they were controlling it in 2010 and 11 with, different tools, social media emerged with now millions of individual broadcasters. So in 20 years, this authoritarian proletarian oligarchy has never come up with this type of challenge where 16, 17-year-old kids on social media who were never relevant, sitting in Fata, Balochistan, Punjab, have somehow become the voice which is challenging their narrative. So when they talk about, the climate issue, or when they talk about the terrorism or the BLAs, it is actually the social media that is challenging them. That no, you're talking about killing these many terrorists in the operations. Turns out there are actually pictures that your people have died. When you talk about that we've never shot a bullet, turns out no, you have images and videos that say the otherwise. The direct challenge to their monopoly on narratives is actually the movement for democracy, I would say. And the other small challenge that I think they're facing right now is the overseas Pakistanis, which we can talk about later. But these three elements, the internal, the external, and the technology, this is the troika that I'm talking about, which is in constellation, challenging the existing traditional structures of power in the country. So as far as the democracy is concerned, what we are seeing is actually the second independence movement of Pakistan. The first independence movement actually got Pakistan rid of the British colonialism to be replaced with the local colonizers. So it was really the independence from the British, not with the local ruling elite. The second wave is probably where we are going through right now, is where we're going to notice I hope so, the true decolonization away from the local ruling elite. Now, what comes out of this is something that we can talk about. Could it be the TLPs, like the 79 revolution, where people thought Ali Shariati would come in? Turns out it was actually Khomeini. So are we looking at a rupture where the military and the PTI and the political class will come in a rupture? None of them win, but the eventual winner is going to actually be either the TLPs or the TTPs or the BLAs. So that's something that I think, from the purpose of democratic questions, I think these are going to be very important questions to ask.
Very interesting, Hussain. Thank you so much for that. And, I really want to pick up on the technological aspect of all of this and the democratization of information that you talked about. And we'll come to that next. But I want to turn to Dr. Pirzada about this, and we can, yes, have a longer conversation about was there ever democracy in Pakistan? Because as you both mentioned right from the outset, there was such collusion between the military and the bureaucracy and the political class in order to even rig elections and forestall the introduction of a constitution, etc. So that is absolutely a larger conversation. But I also want to turn to this the sort of and perhaps it was because of those dynamics right at the outset, but at the societal level, there was such a normalization of authoritarian norms in society, right? And because, there was this, because of, I guess, military rule and because of all of this, there was this ingrained societal acceptance of it. And historically, only a handful of individuals or groups were consistently opposing the excesses of the military rule and martial law, and their voices were very rare. But now, as Hussain has said, these voices are everywhere, right? There is such a massive revolution in terms of, especially on social media, and which is why perhaps we see the clampdown against social media right now in Pakistan as well. But my question is, now that we have that public awareness and there's opposition growing against the military, and this is for you, Dr. Pirzada, how can we ensure, what concrete steps can now be taken to ensure that this shift towards challenging military dominance is not reversed? Because even in this whole Balochistan thing that we just saw, they also have their social media accounts ready. The military does, DGISPR, and they're also churning out information, misinformation. So, but how do we, those people who are now challenging authoritarian rule, how can they make sure that this does not reverse?
Melika, it's a very complex and a very difficult question. Hussain has done the right thing of bringing in the technology into it, and I'm sure that Hussain understands that there are both sides to this technology, most people are relying upon the fact that somehow or the other, the expansion of the technology has empowered the people and the masses. The expansion of the technology has also empowered what you call as the state authorities. And this is what was the nightmare for someone like George Orwell when in 1948 he wrote the book 1984. Orwell took a very negative and pessimistic view of the technology, and the Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, took a very positive view of the expansion of the technology, the availability of technology. But what is playing out in Pakistan, I do not know if any other country or state has experienced the kind of dark use of the technology which has been unleashed in Pakistan increasingly, in the past several years, and much more sharply after 2022. You look at that, something which is so positive that Nadra has the digital record, the pictures, the images, the family tree of all the Pakistanis, right? But in the last 3 years, I'm sure that you and Hussain are both aware that how the Nadra data has been exploited and misused in suppressing the civil liberties and freedom of expression of the people. Several years ago, 3 years ago, Ehsan Iqbal was challenged on a motorway by some girls, by very young female, a mother and 2, 3 daughters, And they basically booed at him and called him dictator or chor chor. And they didn't even call him chor chor. They basically meant that he's supporting the chor chor, Sharif Zardari. And with the help of the Nadra data, the FIA and all other, the family was tracked down. They were, brought under pressure. They were made to apologize to Ehsan Iqbal. They were forced to go to Ehsan Iqbal's home and wherever Hassan Abdallah, wherever, he is, right? There is one instance. Now, thousands and thousands of Pakistanis have been tracked with the help of that digital footprint. All these cases have been registered. You were found at such and such place, geofencing, you were found outside the co-commander's house, you were present close to D Chowk, And so the technology has been used by Pakistani military and by Pakistani state authorities to terrify a population of 250 million. So the technology is playing on both sides. Similarly, if you can actually, bring the videos on YouTube or something, the YouTube algorithm can be disturbed. The Pakistani state has employed thousands and thousands of people that interfere with the algorithm of the YouTube, the Facebook, and so on. So it's actually playing on both sides. Now, how this is going to, end, I hope. I have a sixth sense. It's not easy to explain. I think this public resonance and reaction is not going to die down. We're not going back to ground zero. The hope in the GHU is this, that somehow or the other, they've been continuously thinking this for the past 3 years. That we have to control PTI, we have to control Imran Khan, we have to control Twitter, we have to control YouTube. Now the only problem is the 4, 5 vloggers, maybe some people here and there. Once we either negotiate with them and we give them, or we control them, maybe by giving Sharifullah to Trump administration, extracting a thank you out of Trump, this movement against us has died down, and the age of the innocence in which people relied upon us, they respected us, they thought we were the saviors. The dream after 1965 war that is going to come back. So for all the mental connectivity which is in my mind, which I cannot explain in a short sentence, I think it's not going to happen. For the simple reason, when you think that they hunted down someone like Arshad Sharif in Kenya to set an example for the Pakistani media, and now you look around in the last 3 years and in 2.5 years, how the voice of Arshad Sharif has been multiplied by 100 times. Because before they killed him, Arshad alone himself was raising this, this army chief and all that. Now everyone, if you look at all over the world, the people are raising this thing. Similarly, despite all the crackdown and suppression, they have not been able to suppress the voice of the Pakistani people, and they have also been able to, not very sufficiently, but they have been able to develop inroads into the American legislative system with the help of the Congress. The Pakistani American community and people like yourself have not been able to impress upon the administration, either at Biden or the Trump, so forth. But you have made inroads, and we have made inroads, right? So when you ask the question, what's the way forward? I think we, the Pakistani American community, of which you are a component, of which Hussain is a component, and so many other people, the Canadian Pakistanis, and also the Britishers who haven't really played any role. I think despite the fact that the Pakistani community in Australia and New Zealand is very small, they can still play a role. And Pakistani communities around Europe can also play a role. So we are the torch bearers of human rights, of democracy, of rule of law. And Hussain is right, Pakistan never had democracy. When I said democratic deficit, since we had framed the question in that language, so there is no difference between what Hussain said and what I was saying, that Pakistan had a democratic deficit or absence of democracy from the very beginning. Democracy was never the vision or the inspiration of the Pakistan's founding fathers. If there was a class of people called founding fathers, they had no conception of democracy. I think their only fear which governed them in the creation of Pakistan was that, if we are left behind after the British leave, and we are left behind with a Hindu majority, which is more intellectually sharp, which is more educated, which is much larger in number, then we will not get the proper jobs. I think their own struggle was proper jobs, and they had no, and this was what unfortunately was the message of the Aligarh movement of the 19th century. When I'm trying to read a lot about the Aligarh movement as well, whatever is available, and I understand that the only vision of the Aligarh movement was, if you look the kind of people they have produced from the Aligarh University, they have very ikka dukka, a very few they have produced thinkers, writers, authors, and musicians. What they have produced are civil servants. What they have produced are people, statesmen kind of people, and their goal at the time was in 19th century that we have to be loyal Mohammedans to the British imperial order, and we have to serve the empire. And that was the Aligarh vision that led ultimately to Pakistan, that British are leaving, our mentors are leaving, what will happen to our jobs, in order to get the jobs for a certain kind of elite, they created Pakistan. So there wasn't really a democratic vision behind Pakistan. So I think I have sufficiently addressed your question.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pirzada. And you're talking about that first independence movement, I guess, but I really want to then also bring it back to what Hussain said about the second independence movement. And I really want to sort of ask you, Hussain, to keep going with that theme and sort of talk about, you work in the intersection of AI and policy, right? So we've seen how on social media, we have these incredible social media activists who are raising and sort of really challenging this narrative against military authoritarianism. But then how can AI at this point be used to protect and empower Pakistan's civil society at a time when we see the government coming out with terms like digital terrorists, coming up with laws, trying to crack down on them. Dr. Pirzada sort of mentioned how technology is being used in that way. So what are some transformations within technology or AI, like blockchain, that can help thwart that crackdown against this movement for independence? You're muted.
Let me start building it from the second war of independence, which I like to call the fundamentals. If you look at any independence movement, revolutionary movement, rebel movement, be it the French, the Russian, the Bolsheviks, or the American, and I used to teach a course on the American and the French Revolution. The revolution is fought, or the struggle is fought, at two levels. There is a muscle level where there is a force that is fighting on the ground, and then there is an intellectual level where there is a revolutionary literature coming out, the intellectuals that are coming up with the language of the revolution or the language of freedom. Now, the American Revolution and the French were both beautiful in that. American a little bit more so. I think their concepts and the founding fathers had a very nice split with the George Washingtons, the Benjamin Franklins, who was a little bit different on the tangent, but Thomas Jefferson's. The intellectual, brainy people who could create the language of freedom. Now, if you look at the Pakistan's movement, the initial, the 47, and right now, which I kind of continue to encourage and talk about it, we don't have a concept of freedom the way the rest of the world has. And I can give you one very short example of that data privacy, or why it matters, is not a concept that exists in the Pakistan public. The concept of privacy, because we have evolved as a very different society. There are certain concepts of freedoms, democracies that were never actually embedded or included in our curriculum. And the language of independence and freedom was never cultivated in the country. Because again, like I said, the purpose was to never actually build a democratic nation. The Praetolian oligarchy, the ruling elite, was doing exactly they were doing, and they were having a really good time in doing that. But that model was not sustainable. The successive military regimes, the political regimes, I mean, you pick a politician in the last 30, 40, 50, 70 years. You pick a military general who has ruled and tell me they've not gotten wealthy by doing public service to Pakistan. Tremendously wealthy. Their generations, that kind of generational wealth they've been able to build from, General Ayub Khan all the way down to Umar Ayub Khan to this date, he's been enabled into politics. Now, that language and the concept of freedom did not exist. What we need right now, I mean, be it PTI, be it any other political party or what it is, Imran Khan kind of, in a very small, in a very effective way, Imran Khan introduced and started building the language and the concept of freedom. क्या हम कोई गुलाम हैं गुलामी ना मंजूर these are all the certain concepts, but Imran Khan is unfortunately also a fighter who is fighting the muscle. He's also the intellectual journey. There is no second person in PTI or in the intellectual space that you can pick up and say, this person is talking the language of freedom. This person is writing literature. And the unfortunate part is that has dwindled over the time. I mean, there was a time when we had Sadat Hasan Mantos writing literature in the time of the partition, writing about the mess of the partition and all the way in the Ayub Khan eras, we had Faiz Ahmed Faiz, then we had Habib Jalibs. Name a poet from this time now. It is Ahmed Farad who's doing something and who's talking about it. But the revolutionary poet, the revolutionary literature, or the freedoms and all, intellectual stagnation that has happened, which comes with the this whole authoritarianism, is really, really deeply felt. Which is why you won't see revolutionary material or freedom of concept coming out of North Korea. It usually comes out of places where there is relative freedom, or there is a sort of like hybridity where people are able to say but not able to have that and experience the pain of suffering of that as well. Now, how does that fit into what I do and the technology part of AI and everything? Technology is a new language. I see it as a new language. I see it as a new framework. I see it as a new medium and the messaging as well. So I 100% agree with Dr. Moeed on this part. And I worked in the government long enough to tell you, every dictator and wannabe dictator looks at AI and he thinks that this is my way to rule the world. That's how they look at it. I'm going to rule forever, the algorithmic governance and everything. I will, live forever. The good part about this, where I was saying it at a conference on civil military relations at LUMS, about 3 days back, that we are extremely lucky in Pakistan in a way that we have an incompetent government. Imagine there was a competent government in place who could use technology and deploy technology.
Right.
We would not even stand a chance. There was no chance. So, Alhamdulillah, and maybe God built it that way, where we had incompetent rulers, leaders, military officials, civil bureaucracy, which is so deeply incompetent that actually they cannot even enforce authoritarianism in a
If we
right
had
way.
Chinese, if we had Chinese
Yeah.
Communist Party,
We would be done. We would be done. So the incompetence
roasted.
of the state, and this policy leaders over time period, and their complacency has actually created a space for democracy in Pakistan. So I'm all for incompetence in the government and all, because their ability to use technology. I'll give you an example. They've been trying to put in this a very stupid Chinese firewall for the last year now. They spent millions on it, and they still can't enforce it because the system is broken. And they think that you can just go and buy some product which is called Chinese firewall, and you will put a floppy in or a CD or USB into their system, and it will be live. That's not how the firewalls work. The firewall is a whole maintenance structures. It goes into different categories, and it has different layers of architecture. The problem is, who in the Pakistani government and the IT, jinki bhartiyan jo huई hai, the way they've been hired is through like friends of friends and cousins of friends. None of them have the capability to actually even install firewalls. I mean, and I'm saying that to
Corruption
you
has
because
worked to our advantage for once.
for corruption in the long term actually worked in a way where the system is so broken that even when they try to become authoritarian, they have
Fail
episodes of
even at that.
authoritarianism.
Yes.
So they have episodes of authoritarianism where they're able to control. And right now, I mean, I'll give you the best example of that. The most heavily funded defense budgets, the intelligence budgets. I mean, we are a security state. and a whole bloody train gets hijacked. A whole train gets hijacked. And they still call it intelligence successful operation. I mean, there are events after events, which tell you exactly one thing, that we should be grateful at their level of incompetence, which has created a space for democracy in the country. Now, the where is the competence on technology coming from? It is coming from the 16, 17, 18, 20-year-old kids from Pakistan.
Right.
So those are the people that are coming. And they understand, by the way, the military governments and these regimes understand where the competence is coming from. So what they try to do is they switch off the internet. They'll make their life miserable. They'll either have to run from Pakistan, or if they remain in Pakistan, they have to be hostage to these military ruling elite. But it cannot be sustained, because it's a twin-edged sword. So if you don't go into technology, if you don't open the internet and all of that, your economy is shrinking. If your economy is shrinking, you're not able to continue with that muscle and the military might and all of that. You need fuel for that. So in a way, I mean, I usually talk about it very openly. The system is crashing. The real question is whether it is going to be landing on the rocks or on the sand. Imran Khan can potentially direct it to crash on the sand where there is a soft landing. But the way these guys are doing, they're going to crash it on the rocks, and the whole system is going to erupt, because there is no way possible. And this is something that I'm coming from having spent a decade and plus in both the civilian and the military side of things, understanding how the system is unable to, go forward. And from that, I do believe there is a possibility, which I talked about earlier as well, that Pakistan is in a quantum state right now. We could either become a total North Korea style of regime, or a TLP, like Iran kind of like a regime where we have TLPs, or we can become truly, truly democratic. Now, the thinking heads, the ruling elite, if it was even iota of smart enough, even if I had even an iota of sense, would naturally understand that, going on this side of things, the North Korean, the TLPs, is going to be the end of them first. The
Right.
people might actually not care, but it is really, they're going to come after these super elites. The democracy part, if they're able to allow, the democracy and the people power to come into action, they at least stand a chance where they may be able to retain their legacies, like, the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and all of that, who still have like buildings at their name, but they really don't control the show anymore. So I do think that the ruling elite, if it was smart enough, they would take a right direction. I don't think they're smart enough, which is why we're in a mess at the moment.
Absolutely. And that's very reassuring to hear in a very perverse kind of a way, Hussain. So thank you for saying that. But, you raise a very important point, and that is the intellectual leaders. Who are the intellectual leaders that can provide that language of freedom, that concept of freedom? And yes, in a way that's happening at the technological level, these 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are sort of raising their voices, they're doing that on social media. But Dr. Pirzada, I'd like to ask you, where are our historians? Where are our academics here, even in the diaspora, who have not joined in this chorus, in this very critical moment that we're in, that Hussain talks about, this quantum moment, right? Where are they? I mean, you see people in the diaspora like yourselves, who've consistently been raising your voices against military authoritarianism, promoting human rights and democracy. And yet you see this very liberal elite that is completely absent from the discourse. And they're here in the diaspora, they're in academic institutions. These are former ambassadors who are very much about, talking about ending military rule in Pakistan. But these are also others, people who have made huge names for themselves in the climate industry and climate justice. And these are very respectable people, but they have not spoken out. So in terms of providing that intellectual foundation, how can we create a wider coalition and bring them in, because they have such a huge part to play at this time?
Mehelka, thank you. I think you and Hussain have touched upon a very raw nerve. When you look at the kind of resistance that has developed even across the United States, it has mostly come from physicians who were economically independent. They were not businessmen. They were not academics. In the first place, there are very few Pakistani origin academics in North America as compared to, for instance, the Indians, who are in population 6 times, but in terms of academia, they're perhaps represented 50 times or 60 times more than the Pakistanis here. But the resistance has come from economically independent physicians, surgeons, doctors, and others whose occupation in no way can be has anything or any nexus to do with the state of Pakistan. The Pakistani businessmen and entrepreneurs keep on thinking that, if they offend the military rulers, they're also looking in terms of the export-import possibilities, setting up business units in Pakistan. They also want to be received at the airports. They want to have access, to important Pakistanis, and the most important Pakistanis are the army officers and the politicians. This is one part of the picture. Then the academia, there has been total silence from the Pakistani origin professors, assistant professors, directors, or maybe people inside the think tanks within United States and within UK. Once again, why it is so? Because I mentioned earlier, Pakistani academia is also a byproduct, by and large, what the Hussain says, the first war of independence. This is actually a byproduct of the Aligarh movement. The Aligarh movement was actually a reaction to the failure of the War of Independence of 1857, which was ruthlessly and tyrannically suppressed by the East India Company and by the British. So Aligarh movement's response was this, that we have to be loyal to the British authorities and to the imperial order. And we will be loyal, we'll learn the English languages, a little bit of sciences, a little bit of mathematics, we'll speak good English, we'll try to have a British accent. And I mean, you looked at how much the Pakistani intelligentsia emphasizes upon the right British accent. So the hallmark of someone being intelligent or educated is British accent. If you don't really have the British accent, even if you have the American accent, you're not a proper person. You have to have a British.
Not sophisticated enough.
They're not sophisticated enough. And Pakistani civil servants and army officers still think that the Britain is still running the world, and the most intelligent people are people like James Bond and MI and everything like this. So the Aligarh movement, which led to the creation of Pakistan, never created the desire for genuine learning. And the Aligarh and the byproducts of the Aligarh movement will never question the imperialism. The Aligarh movement cannot produce something like Arundhati Roy. When you look at the scholars and intellectuals, the firebrand intellectuals like Arundhati Roy, which are so many in United States. I mean, if you look in this country, they're totally absent from the Pakistani diaspora. So we do not have any established academia unless the younger postgraduate students and master students in American, Canadian, and British universities, or students from the LUMS or an IBA join in this struggle with the ideas. There is no class of ideas. When you look at you have referred to the retired diplomats who write columns in Pakistani papers, who also give talks in American think tanks, and they have come to Foreign Office. Look at this. I mean, there's total absence of ideas. Now, despite all the upheaval, which Hussain called the Second War of Independence, these people are still talking in terms of US-Pakistan relationship, American companies investing into Pakistan, mango diplomacy and things like this. So Pakistanis are bereft of a class of ideas. They have no class that has any ideas, and that is a very difficult and tragic part of the struggle.
Right. I know it's very unfortunate, because I think this coalition needs to become much wider, but you've really very perfectly identified the reasons why there isn't that broader based sort of coalition effort at this point. So Hussain, I want to also sort of come back to this quantum moment, or I think, is that how you describe it, that we're currently in, that if we do not, we can either go in one direction, the TLP direction, or in a completely different revolutionary democratic Pakistan's direction. Where do you think, I mean, your work is in AI-based predictive analysis, right? So in that moment, we see all of the activity happening on social media and technology and all of that. But how do you see the current stability and strength of Pakistan's military regime? Like, where is that at this point? And how close are we?
I just want to make a quick introduction, then go back to Hussain. Yes. Some people want to ask questions. They have written questions.
Yes.
I was trying to answer the question, but my laptop, which I don't fully understand, starts typing all the conversation because this auto type is open, So I don't know.
Oh, no. So, Dr. Pizada, you know what? Don't answer the questions yet. We're going to come to questions in just a
minute. So take the questions after Hussain answers.
Yeah. So after Hussain's response, we're going to get to the audience Q&A, and I hope that they continue to submit that question. So that's great. So yes, Hussain, again, how stable is this current regime? How close are we to creating that democratic system that we are hoping for?
So I'll try to answer this question, and I want to add a little bit on what the intellectual conversation that we were having on the intelligentsia in Pakistan. It's kind of like the same conversation. So countries can survive economic collapses, political collapses, all sorts of collapses. Economic collapse doesn't take too long to recoup with 3-4 years of right policies, and you can recover. Political collapse, some level of political dialogue, national dialogue, etc., and you can recover. What Pakistan is actually facing, and I'm very unfortunate to say this thing, is something much, much bigger than this right now. We're facing an intellectual collapse of a state society, which also moves into a cultural collapse and the ethical and moral collapse of the society. That takes generations to actually recover from. So this element is very important, and it starts with really the intellectual class of the society. I mean, if you look at the quality of the public intellectuals in Pakistan, myself included, we're simply not very honest in our analysis. And by honest, I don't really mean that we just lie about things. What I really mean is that, and we talked about, the Indian intelligentsia, Gayatri Spivak, for instance, Homi Bhabha, for instance. These are the people, if you look at them, they're very deeply attuned to their language, number one. Two, they're very comfortable in their skin, very comfortable in their skin. The caricature of the Pakistani state society is that we face when we call the identity crisis. What the identity crisis really leads up to is that we still think, parts of Pakistan think that we are Mughals, the other part thinks that we are Sayyids, the third part thinks that, we're not Indian. So our identity is everything not Indian. We're not comfortable in our skin. And to now, when the whole Pakistani society and state is feeling under pressure, the visa issues and all, you'll find half of the Pakistani engineers in Silicon Valley, when asked who they are, they tell you that they're Indian.
Indians.
I'm totally fine with that. I don't think there's any problem with that. But the truth is that we're orphans that are trying to find identities as fathers. We don't know how we are, and that unfortunately the national project, the nationhood project, never really was able to culminate. Okay, so the intellectual crisis in the intelligentsia, when we talk about it, has been it has a lot to do with money, right? So who's sponsoring them? Where does the money come from? Most of the academia in Pakistan, the universities, if you look at the assistant professor, the lecturer, and the associate professors, they are ranked officials. Grade 17 is lecturer, grade 18 is assistant professor, grade 19 is that. Now, you put them into a bureaucratic model, right? So bureaucracy, when they come in contact with the civil bureaucracy, the DMG, an assistant professor is basically a low-class citizen in the society. In the US, for instance, when I teach over here and you're part of the university, in the society, even if you don't earn the top dollars, but your respect and your prestige, when I go to the State Departments or the Pentagons, they respect you, the level of respect you get. So over here, when you go and give lectures or talks, they thank you and they give invitations, and the entire configuration is way that they're the ones who are more appreciative. In Pakistan, if you come in contact with the military official or the civil official, first you won't get a time to have the audience with them. They actually call it the audience, having an audience with the boss and all of that.
Right, with the court.
So the dynamics completely change, because now you bureaucratize the intellectual class by funding the government, state-funded departments, and a very heavy involvement of the military institutions in places like NAS, ABCD, and then civilian bureaucracy that is running, the Quaid-e-Azam universities and the Punjab universities. How do you produce intellectuals in those environments where you are graded officers? So that's one. Now, the ideal thing would have been that these institutions would have been reformed, detached, and created a new class of intellectuals, right? What stepped in? The US aid. Now you have an entire class of intellectuals that are funded by the donor money, which basically means if the donor thinks that the drone strikes are good, they're writing papers and articles that the drone strikes are good. If the donors think that the war in the Ukraine is exactly what the freedom of democracy is, and they're going to start writing that. 20 years later, you find out that your entire intellectual class is more concerned about the Black Lives Movement in the US, the crisis in Gaza, than it actually on their own streets and what is happening in Balochistan. An
Right.
average Pakistani academic has more information and data on what is happening in Gaza, and I don't disagree, that's wrong. It's a great thing, but he doesn't have any knowledge on what's happening in KP and Balochistan because there is
Right.
no data, there is no information, and the government doesn't want to share. So you have an intellectual class which basically is non-existent, or it exists to serve a particular funder, which could be either the military, the civilian government, or unfortunately the foreign funded. So the intellectual class, is, in my opinion, is one big reason why we are here. Now, to the second question on, what can the second was related to,
The stability of the current regime based
the
on your
stability of
AI
the.
predictive analysis. Yeah.
I don't think I need to deploy AI on that, because I think I would rather deploy AI on something much more sophisticated. Here is the thing. Let me place it out, because this is really common sense. I don't think it is anything. You can lie about it, you can be delusional about it, which is fine. But the fact of the matter really is that you have an organization that is trained in violence. It is kept away from the cities. It's trained in violence. It's not trained to think. The decision making is essentially trained for you to open a fire when you face a fire. When you put that institution and its leadership into the civilian domain, where you have tug of war, politics going on, it militarizes the entire space. And anytime there is a criticism, remember one thing: when they face criticism in the civilian space, they equate it as a bullet. So every time Dr. Mohit Pirzada does his podcast, he's firing shots. It's like a machine gun he's holding. So they're seeing them as bullets. They're not seeing them as critique, which an academic like myself would see. They're seeing them as bullets, because to them, this is an enemy now. So they define things very quickly, because the way they're trained in the war games, first and foremost, most important thing for them is to basically put out a picture: who's friend and who's enemy, who are the alliances and all. At the moment they get into the political space, they start doing that: enemy, friend, traitor, this. And once they do that, and anything that comes out from Mohit Pirzada or ABCD, they're like, these are like, Mohit is bombarding them, and Mohit is, flying the F-16.
He's
And
been
they're like,
charged with
so
sedition.
yeah. So that happens. Now, when that happens, their decision making is completely out of panic. They go crazy. And it is meant to do that. When that craziness applied in the warfare and the military battle, it works perfectly fine. It is great. You need that. But when you put it in the governance and the political domain, it wrecks apart the entire country. So if you ask me, what is the stability of the regime? It is God's marvel that this country is still surviving. I mean, I cannot tell you what kind of a miracle it is that this country is still surviving on one and a half leg or half leg or something. But the way they're running the country, it is dysfunctional. It has crashed, and it cannot continue to go forward. Now, people ask me, okay, so what is the the outcome going to look like? What is the crash going to look like? It is going to look exactly like this, and I'll give you a reason. And this is the start of this month, the Ramadan. The TLP has since then attacked about 12 Ahmadi mosques. About 300 people have been arrested, if not more or less, for praying the Friday prayers. That is connected with what is happening in Balochistan. Balochistan has been completely out of their control right now. Most of the districts they don't control. Same with KP. Same with parts of the Sindh. The quality of air in Lahore is unbreathable. The polio still exists. Now, in these seemingly disparaging events, they're actually all the same. It's the governance failure. You can't differentiate, because it's just, like different symptoms of the same problem. So when you have when your body is sick, organs fail at different points. So you don't really say that, this person has a cardiac disease, because the cardiac disease is directly linked with your diabetes, ABCD. The whole dysfunction is there. Now, exactly, if you look at Pakistan as a human body, the entire structure is failing. The minorities, the majorities, the intelligentsia, the media. Name one segment of the society or a group that is not a victim anymore. If everyone is a victim, including me and Nawaz Sharif, apparently, he's also a victim, at least he thinks so, he's a victim, then what is left really is that it's an end game now. Now the question really is, do we want to like change this, reverse this? And which I keep pushing that, there is a time for course correction. do we want to course correct, or we want to live in that continued delusion that we're winning? So I think that really the fork of the road, the fork on the road is, do you want to accept that we have failed and get into the right direction, or do you want to continue with that lie that no, we're winning? And if this is what winning looks like, and then then I think we just got listed in the orange category of the US visas, the travel restrictions. So I guess that's a big winning.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, thank you for that very, what can I say? I mean, I don't know whether it's reassuring or, it's just, yeah, pretty much failing in every institution, in every dimension. And I wonder, when you say course correction, is that where we're at? Or do we need a complete reset in the way we navigate or negotiate societal regime relations or society and government relations? Do we need to go back to the basics, go back to the Constitution? Where are we? I mean, do we need to burn the system down in order to rebuild? And I think as Ahmed Murad here says, when Professor Hussain Nadeem was speaking at the Indiana State House, he said the state is not collapsing, it has already collapsed. That implies a process of rebuilding as required. And so what does that look like? I mean, do we need a complete rebuild? Somebody asked a question about the Constitution. Do we need to go back to the drawing board and look at the way the Constitution, but I mean, even that, if we think about it, the Constitution has some very good points. They're just not enforced, right? So what does that course correction, what does that rebuilding look like? And somebody also, I'm just sort of lumping questions together so we have time for them. What is the scenario beyond Imran Khan? Like, does this course correction, does this need Imran Khan? Does this need a broad-based movement? You said everybody is upset right now. Everybody is a victim in Pakistan. Why aren't they getting together? The Mahrang Baloch, the Pashtun movement, I mean, the Sindhis, there's so many grievances. The minorities, everybody has a grievance against the military. These are legitimate grievances against the military regime. Why isn't there a broad-based movement to bring about change?
You're asking the question to me?
Yes. Why don't you go first, Dr. Pirzada, and then Hussain can probably.
Okay. First of all, I was slightly distracted because there are a lot of very interesting comments and questions, which I was reading.
And please respond to them as you would like.
I tried responding to those questions. The problem is that I have two options. Either I respond verbally, I don't know how to do that. And second is type. When I start typing, my auto type is open. So everything which you are talking, Rosanne is saying, that auto type.
And we want you to respond verbally because that's what,
yes, but
so
I can
that
only,
everybody can hear.
So there are questions from Pakistani physicians as to the Pakistani physicians. One reason they are not as active, or perhaps are not doing as much, is because they do not believe they can bring change. They're also I think it's Saida Batul or someone who says that Pakistani physicians realize they're not Indian community. They're not as powerful or as influential as the Indian communities, and they think that they cannot bring change in Pakistan. So this is now this answer of Batul brings you to your question as well, that why Mahrang Baloch and the Sindhis and the Punjabis and the Pashtuns and so much other disgruntled parts of the resistance, why don't they join together? They don't join together because they don't have trust. There's no one really to connect them. Why Imran Khan became all that important? Because he's the first living human being that is at least connected two major provinces on one point agenda. That is Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and he has strong support in Karachi. There is sympathy for him in Balochistan. There is sympathy for him in Azad Kashmir and GB. And that is why they have locked him up. There is no other leader. The Pakistani people have not really produced the leaders that can bring people together. I mean, look at the leadership of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Look at the leadership of other political parties. They're very parochial. They're very provincial. They're district-wise kind of people. I do not know if many people are prepared to stand up by them in their own district or constituencies as well. None of them has an all Pakistan kind of ability to connect and to communicate. And having said this thing, this is not an easy thing. I have been reading analysis on European dilemma versus the Trump administration, and I came across that Americans are very confident that the Europeans cannot connect together because their 70 years of experience is this, that for Europeans to come to a consensus, the British, the French, the German, Italians have to be brought together by the American persuasions. Americans push them in a direction. With themselves, they're not able to connect on a platform, right? So this is the American hope, and this is where they might actually be surprised by the growing, interconnectivity between the French and the Germans. So Pakistanis do not have the ability to connect to each other. They do not have the leaders. I mean, you need several leaders. There are no leaders.
Okay, all right. Hussain, would you want to respond to that? Anything that Muid just mentioned, or any of the questions that came up?
So a couple of things on this. This talked about the state not collapsing, state already collapsed. I don't think there is any. The evidence is plenty over there now. I don't think there is any evidence left that doesn't point it in that direction. What does the process looks like? We go back to the drawing board, we draft a constitution. Where do we start on this? I think I resonate with Moeed on this part. At the heart of the problem is the breakdown of public trust in state institutions, in political leadership, in their neighbors. And what does the trust looks like? Trust is the core infrastructure of nationhood, democracies, and even authoritarianism for that matter. When I go out with my car on the road, there is an element of trust that the other person is going to respect the red light so that I can cross on the green. If that trust breaks down, which has broken down in the Pakistani streets, if you drive in Karachi and Lahore, you would know, what do you do then? When the trust breaks down, you start building big walls around your houses. Now, one of the most interesting things that I talk about is if you look at the urbanization, back in the days in where my family comes from, the Lahore Sheher, the houses were all together. There was community living. The Havelis were all together. There were no walls and everybody was living till you started the commercialization in the 80s and the 90s. And you started noticing, especially during the Musharraf time and later, that the houses started getting bigger and the walls started growing higher. Islamabad, if you go down the Margala roads and all, you see these like 20 feet walls now. And you realize most of the times these are, the zamindars, the feudals from Ballots and the same. So the walls are growing bigger in those parts of the world. That tells you a lot of the state of the society and the elite.
Right.
The elite is distrustful. Forget about the people, the Baloch and all. How many actually people from Punjab have actually traveled to Balochistan? You'd be surprised to know the numbers. How many of them have gone to the tribal areas and all? These places have been made, and let me rephrase it. There are parts of Pakistan that have been made practically inaccessible by the military regimes because those parts are suit much better to the businesses, to the geopolitical interests, if they are kept in a controlled chaos. Balochistan is unfortunately a place which has been kept under a manageable chaos. Now, time to time, the chaos spills over, and then you see events like the BLAs and all. But most of the time, they're fine with it. Some chaos, but we'll able to be managed. But the larger project of, the militarization of Balochistan continues. That's the same with the KP, the tribal belt. You wanted to keep it under a manageable chaos. Now, the place where they wanted a complete control was actually Punjab, which went into a chaos, which is why the bulldozement of the policing and the intelligence, which is creating a wreck now. So there is the psyche where you have a ruling elite that is distrustful with each other. The military elite that doesn't trust the political dynasties that they're in, by the way, in partnership with right now. Not even that they're not in partnership. And then the political dynasties that have been trying to kill each other for a very long time. And then there is a third factor, which is Imran Khan, which they all got together with to go against, but yet they still don't trust each other. So even if you remove Imran Khan from the picture and anyone think that there will be stability and the normalization is living in a fool's paradise. So the distrust at the elite level exists, the distrust at the public level exists, the distrust at every single segment exists with the institutions. For a very long time, the country was being held by a trust in one institution, that was the army. What the chaos that we are seeing in this stage of the in Pakistan's history is not that people stopped trusting the bureaucrats or the political class. They never did. It's the trust in the military that has dwindled, And out of that is coming this whole chaos. The eruption is that. Now, the real question, and I think the 8th February election was really a referendum against the military in favor of Imran Khan. Now, I don't think there are too many probabilities that we have or the possibilities we have. We have one very straightforward thing we can do. If we don't do that, I don't think there is another way. Imran Khan carries the public trust of the large set of a population across different provinces. The first and foremost thing is whether you like him or not, whether you agree with his government or not. Frankly, I don't think he was one of the best of the prime ministers. He had a great opportunity, could do great, but he didn't. That's a separate debate right now. But he has a public trust. You bring him out, you allow him to gather the public trust, different political parties from Maharang Baloch to Manzoor Pashtuns. He has to bring everyone under the umbrella, the minorities, especially the women, the Pashtuns, those sitting in in the bordering regions. You have to bring them together. And once you have that picture together, only then you can come up with another methodology of a constitution or a framework or something. But I do think for Pakistan to start off with on the front of any change, I think the first most important question is an apology. There has to be a very, very serious apology and truth that has to come out of it.
And who has to apologize to whom? Who has, yeah.
I think
Is
it's
it the
it's the
military? Is
military
it the...
regime that has to. I think it's the military regime and mostly the political class across the board. Even I would say including Imran Khan. Each one of them have to apologize to different segments of the society. And if they don't, if one thinks, if Imran Khan thinks, no, I have no apologies to be made. He has to apologize for all the wrongs he did, the previous ones for they did. And once there is an apology set that is there, then comes out the truth part. Maybe set up a truth and reconciliation, something like that, where people start agreeing that, for 70 years, we've done this in Balochistan, we've done this and all. Beyond that, I mean, as funny as it may be, beyond that, I don't think there is a way to redeem the country.
So, but Hussain, like an apology from any segment of the ruling elite would be such a miracle that, that would be such a divine intervention. I completely agree. That is the way forward. But it will be so hard to come by. They haven't yet apologized for Bangladesh, right? They haven't apologized for East Pakistan. What will bring them
Which is why we're here.
Which is why we're here. Absolutely. I agree with you. But yes.
Moeed wants to say something.
Yes.
Yeah. So Hussain is very much right regarding the apology. The number of points, which are after listening to, because Hussain has made some very, very out of the box kind of, the comments, So first about something, before I say about the apology, there's something else which he said a short while ago, that how they have brought the intellectuals and academics into a graded discipline, 17 grade, 18 grade, 19 grade, and 20 grade, right? There was a General Sahab, a good, well-meaning General Sahab who really liked Hussain. I met him. Hussain was not there several years ago. And he said that we have got this very. I had interacted with Hussain in Australia, and I was a great admirer of him. So the General Sahab said that we got this very intelligent young man, and we have brought him, and we're trying to bring him into IPRI and something like this. Well, I said, well, he's far too intelligent for your structure and setup. He's not going to stay here. He said, no, we have offered him grade M1 or something. We're offering him a car, a petrol. We're also giving him a house somewhere, in Islamabad. Mein ghar kahan milta hai. I said, well, I think his place has to be in Yale or Harvard or Princeton or somewhere. He's not going to stick here. He says, no, we have given him all the facilities. He's interacting with the government and everything. So there is a material misunderstanding. I mean, while people are condemning and criticizing the military what is missed is this, that apart from the class interest and apart from the political interest or the greed or the money and the plots and the houses and farmhouses, the military officers have a total inability to understand the social and political dynamics. Now, when Hussain says that when Moeed speaks, they see bullets coming, right? They see us as F-16 pilots, as bullets, right? In the last 48 hours or 72 hours, when I have actually tried for the first time, I took an interest in BLA's perspective. BLA's perspective is already there on the Twitter, and they've done several English publications. But we have never even gone and read it,
right?
Because we have been so oblivious. It is a failure that we haven't really gone and tried understanding the what BLA and the other Baloch people are saying. We only see them as occasional protesters on the scene, right? So I went there and I tried understanding the BLA's perspective. In my last 2 or 3 vlogs, I brought BLA's perspective. And my God, you have to see the kind of anger that has flown from the military officers who come and whose duty is to comment on my YouTube. They said, I mean, while I'm already a traitor, while I'm already a
Or a
terrorist,
traitor all over again.
all over that has been multiplied by 100 times. The
Yes.
thing that, I am giving enemy's perspective. I am aligned myself with the enemy of the state. Well, BLA, I clearly see, are in possession of several Pakistani Jawans, right? They want to basically negotiate. So if you basically come and tell the people that, my analysis reveals that BLA isn't, because, I mean, what the DG ISPR wants to tell the people of Pakistan is that BLA took control of a whole train. It's 9 bogies. And they were waiting for the Pakistani SSG commandos to come and rescue the people sitting inside the train. How intelligent is this, right? I mean, it all means that they basically took away some of the people as hostages, right? And now they have the hostages. So if you say they have the hostages, they actually think that you're siding with the enemy. So that is the
Yes.
uh,
And Mohit, that's exact. I'm so glad that you're bringing this whole issue up about the BLA and trying to understand the underlying causes, because for far too long, our intellectual class, and that also includes people like you and others, who were completely oblivious to all of the disenfranchisement that was happening in other parts of the country because the Punjab was secure. Right. And because of that, there has been such a level of just lack of information around these very, very legitimate grievances that other communities have had. And I think that prevents that greater coalition that we're talking about at this point. But guys, we're coming to the end of the program. So I do want to just ask you a few questions based on what our audience have also said. Hussain earlier said that, if Imran Khan comes out, he is that person who has the ability to unify a lot of different forces, a lot of different groups at this point. So somebody asked, do you think things might be different if Imran Khan reached across the aisle and tried to engage in dialogue? And this came as an anonymous question. And my other thing is, so that is one way, right? So he comes out and then he negotiates. But if he comes out, the only way he's going to come out is there's some deal with the military. And and so my question is around that, how do you see that? Because will that then preserve the status quo in that the military will be back in the political process, while right now at this moment, we're at a very critical point where if there's enough movement and momentum, either from overseas Pakistanis or from people on the ground, we can actually just for once and for all address this, very dysfunctional civil military balance. So which way is it going to be? Which way is it going to sort of reshape things the way they are? I mean, sort of get us out of this bog that we're currently in.
So I have a slightly more radical opinion on this, and me and Mohit have had long conversations in our drive to New York and back.
Right back from New York.
Back from New York. I
The same.
I don't think yeah. I don't think there should be a deal at all. There will not be a military deal. There has to be a surrender, a total surrender, a complete surrender. And the reason why I say that is because we have
A complete surrender,
kind of
what does that mean? What does that mean, complete surrender?
The forces that are in power right now have to
They have to
completely
surrender.
surrender their power.
Okay.
There is no two lines to it. There is no two way on this. You do this, I do this. It has to be a one-way surrender because there is an oppressing force right now which is breaking down the country. The other guy is sitting in the prison. The attempts to have a deal essentially basically means one thing, which is that, let's say if Imran Khan is able to cut a deal right now, the message that it sends out to the current military regime and all the military regimes that are going to come for a long time, it is that, with enough pressure applied and enough brutality and violence, you can break even a guy like Imran Khan. So forget about anyone else. But if the message goes out that someone can be, you can still get a deal by applying pressure, violence, and these dirty tactics, I don't think Pakistan can ever recover out of it. The democracy will never flourish. There will always be a military regime because now because these institutions work on institutional memory. And they have memories from Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. We hanged Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. What happened? We still retained power. The Benazir Bhutto, the Akbar Buktis, nothing really happened, right? So
Yeah.
when they cut a deal with Imran Khan, or Imran Khan is able to come out in a deal kind of a setting, the problem will be this thing that it's not going to resolve the issue. It has to be a total surrender from one side. And by surrender, we have attached a negative connotation to it. I don't mean it in a negative way. Course correction and surrendering when you are completely outwitted, completely being, outwon, is an honorable thing to do. The dishonorable thing is to continue fighting when there is no fight and taking down the entire country and the 240 million people with you. That's a dishonorable thing. The honorable thing is to lay down the weapon. The honorable thing is to accept that you have been defeated comprehensively and allow the forces of stability to take over. You are not the forces of stability anymore. The PMLNs, the PDMs, the PPPs, this whatever mix achar that we have right now, this is not the forces of stability led by a military regime. The force of stability will be what is sitting in the, and that too, if he does all the right things, can restore the faith in the society, can restore the public trust, and then make all the right decisions to do that. So I think the course correction is going to be the most important thing. It will start one way, and the recognition. This is where I'm constantly pressing upon it, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not. The reckoning doesn't have to come from the side that is getting the beating. The victims are not going to come up with the reckoning. It is the oppressor and the abuser who's in power that has to come through that spiritual evolution where they come, apologize, because apology is where they're going to start the course correction. They have to be made to be apologized. Then there comes the part where they surrender and then course correct. If it doesn't happen from their side, I mean, the other side, what are they going to do? What possibly can they offer, right? They're going to give up. And once they give up, then your generations and their generations are going to continue in this cycle of violence and tyranny. So it has to come from that one side.
Yeah. And so the forces of stability, you think that that's Imran Khan, and he absolutely should not take a deal. And I completely agree with you on that as well. But then where is that pressure going to come that is going to get the military to surrender or course correct, recognize that it's failing? My question is it people on the ground that are going to bring about that pressure? Dr. Nasser Shahid had a question about, what if thousands of people come out with help from overseas Pakistanis and they literally just take over a square or the DH chalk? I mean, we saw what happened on November 26th, which was horrible. But is it going to be a combination, a confluence of factors, both internal pressure, help with outside pressure, international media attention, US pressure through congressional letters, legislation? What is it going to be that is going to bring about that, allow that space to emerge?
All of the above. We tend to underestimate how far we've come, actually, because the people think, oh, you guys are putting in so much efforts and so much has happened, but they're still in power. You're talking about an institution that has 150 years of history and 77 years of history in a Pakistan context. If you expect like a few vlogs or a few movements or a few DCHOCs to actually change that, it's not going to happen. But since the last 2-3 years, the movement to restore democracy or actually build democracy or to challenge their might has already made unimaginable advances, where at the heart of even the military's rank and file and the military families also believe that this is not the model the country is going to go forward with. And the second thing, and I'm going to close at that, I'll let Mohit speak, is for the very long time since I've ever known in Pakistan, the question was really, if democracy is compatible with Islam. People used to say, we need Khilafat, maybe we need a different system, or we need, the military. And democracy isn't really the best method. I've grown up in Pakistan where democracy was never really considered one of the best methods.
Yeah.
To a point where in the last 3 years, there is a unanimous agreement in the largest political party, PTI, from Waziristan all the way to that democracy is the only viable model for the country.
Right.
I think what the greatest thing Imran Khan has been able to do, and these crises and the chaos has been able to do, is get the people to agree on one thing, that there is nothing else but democracy we want as a functioning model. Nobody's talking about the Khilafat anymore or anything. Even the TLPs are essentially, in favor of, some level of human rights and et cetera, although they're themselves a little bit problematic. So this agreement and this consensus that democracy is is going to be the way forward for us. I think it's a huge achievement for Pakistan already.
Excellent, excellent. And Dr. Pirzada, you'll have the last word.
So, as Hussain mentioned, that when we were coming back from the Long Island, we were together in a car, and we had violently agreed and disagreed. And while we disagreed in many things, we were discussing about the mistakes which Imran Khan and PTI have done. One thing on which you could agree is that Imran Khan, through his stand, has made a difference, right? By his bold stand, and that he was not for sale, he was not for compromise. Every other politician in Pakistan was prepared to make a compromise on principles for his own material interest. Imran has demonstrated that while he can do mistakes and blunders and misjudgments and confusions, he has no material interests to compromise for. He's not deriving any material interest of it, and that is where the problem is for the GHQ. Now, there are a lot of disagreements. I'm still confused as to what Hussain describes. There is no doubt he says that we have come a long way. The long way is an awareness, is a consciousness in people of Pakistan. Look at the students of LUMS, look at the students of IBA, which are themselves sophisticated end products of the Aligarh movement, at the tail end of the Aligarh movement, But they have started realizing that something is going wrong. Otherwise, they want to have MBA degree and they want to have the spreadsheet analysis and that's it, that sort of thing. So, but when Hussain says that complete surrender, and then you, of course, raise the question that where are the sets of circumstances in which the generals and the GHQ think that they have no options left and they must actually surrender. I agree with Hussain, the word surrender has all the negative connotations, but surrender doesn't mean surrender, because when you use the word surrender, you think you have laid down your arms. But basically, you have to find a way out. For instance, we always condemned the Pakistani Eastern Garrison in 1971 for surrendering. What option they had at that time, All the politics of the former East Pakistan had collapsed. The West was not able to help them. If the Pakistani garrison in East Pakistan would have fought, could have fought for another 10, 15 days at extreme cost of bloodshed. They were 20, 30, 40,000 men locked inside a certain small geography, and they could have ended up killing a large number of Bengalis and themselves. That was the only achievement which could have satisfied many people in Punjab that they had sense of honor and everything. But surrender is important, and surrender could provide a way out. But I do not think, looking at the commentaries coming from the military system, that they even think that they have the kind of pressure. They think they have controlled all Pakistan. Imran Khan has done the utmost favor to them by locking himself in the jail, where they can control everything that he eats, drinks, and whatever. And the latest thing in the last 24 hours is that they are compelling the PTI to take control of the social media on the outside. So while the PTI team like Salman Akram Raja and Umar Ayub and the others have no control on us, they at least want to use them to influence the PTI social media team that has escaped from their crutches and sitting in London or in Chicago, and they want to basically tone down the thing. So I don't see where Hussain thinks there is a sufficient pressure upon them. Yes, he made an earlier comment when he described that what would be the end state. And I'm going to say something that might actually shock many people. If things continue the way they're continuing, Pakistan would be chaos at every street, dacoits in Punjab, some kind of religious elements taking control of the mosques. There'll be more trouble in Sindh, Balochistan out of control, GB part of the trouble, Azad Kashmir disturbed, more and more bloodshed in KP. I think the pressure can come upon the military. I mean, forgive me for saying this thing. It is the BLAs and the TTPs. Their activities can compel the military to think that then we need a leader to negotiate with this chaos. Because I don't see Pakistani military has any capacity to deal with the chaos that is being produced by TTP and BLA. So there is some, because people of Punjab, I'm sorry to say, they have demonstrated this thing. They neither have the understanding nor the will. And in fact, understanding is a bigger problem. They're still basically caught in the rut, whether Hussain is very confident that they think that democracy is important. I think the moment the mullah comes up on television and starts telling them that your democracy is the sazish of the Angrez and the American and the West, they will succumb to him the way on 24th of November, when they saw the soldiers, they went there and embraced the soldiers thinking they are their friends. And 2 days down the line, the same soldiers unleashed the firepower against the people of Pakistan. So there is a lot of mental confusion in the minds of the people of Pakistan. They're not able to challenge the mullah unless they're able to challenge the military mullah alliance and see the rot. It's hundreds of years of crisis. It's not a 3-year crisis. It's at least a 300-year of inertia of the South Asian Musliman that we are now dealing with.
Well, on that pessimistic note, I would like to end with some optimism. I do agree, Dr. Pirzada, you have a very realistic analysis of the situation. I completely agree. But I also tend to agree with Hussain, because I really feel that the sort of revolution that we are seeing in terms of people's awareness and their ability to speak out and challenge military authoritarianism, despite all of the risks, personal risks involved, is unprecedented. I think it's historic. And I think this moment is really, really important. And I feel like all of us, especially those of us who are in the diaspora, Hussain talked about the sort of change in our approach to democracy inside Pakistan, and the fact that people do believe that that is a very, very good sort of system of governance. And especially the younger generation, I feel like they really are our future and they really are our hope. And they see all the different oppressions connected and how there's this big system that is there that is carrying out those oppressions, whether it's the Ballots or the Sindhis or the Punjabis or against the PTI, and then also globally the BLM. These movements, they're all connected. I know you want to say something, Dr.
Last word, just last word. I'll be most happy if Hussain and your analysis is right and mine is wrong.
Inshallah, yes, we do that, and there is hope. And I will also say at this point that yes, while there's a lot of talk about how overseas Pakistanis have been active but haven't really made a dent, I will say that that is also unprecedented. 3 years ago, nobody in the American Congress was talking about democracy and human rights, and now we have more than 100 bipartisan congressional representatives talking about exactly those things, and talking and naming military chiefs like they never would have done before. And so I think that is, so there is movement, and we just have to keep building the momentum, not give up. This is that moment to really not be discouraged. So, and I would like to thank both Dr. Pirzada and Dr. Nadeem for joining us today. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your inspiration. You've really given us so much to think about. Keep doing the good work you're doing. To everybody who joined us today, thank you for your questions. They were very, very thoughtful questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but please do keep joining us. This is a series. We'll have more events coming up in the next few weeks. So, and if you'd like to join our mailing list, please email me at mehlaka.samdani.capj@gmail.com, or you can visit our website, www.ca4, as in the number 4pj.org. And with that, I'm now going to conclude our session. Thank you again, both to our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.